For more on this, I'm now joined from Washington, D.C. by Firas MAKSAD. He's the director of Arabia Foundation and adjunct professor at George Washington University's Elliott School for International Affairs. Hello, thank you very much indeed for joining us. How significant is this announcement?
This is a historic announcement for Saudi Arabia, really a historic juncture like no other. The Middle East rarely gives us good news. This is a rare piece of good news, but one needs to also put it in context. Some might write it off as a PR stunt, perhaps, given that Saudi Arabia has long been criticized for not allowing women to drive. But if we take stock of what has happened in the past year, the king has ordered the review of the guardianship laws, these laws that necessitate that women get the approval of family members, men in the family, to go into hospitals, to go into schools, to get basic government procedures done. That has been reviewed, and as I understand, some have been now repealed, allowing women into to stadiums and public places and public celebrations, and now finally allowing the women to drive. So really there's a trajectory here, a very positive trajectory that the Saudi kingdom seems to be on with King Salman and his crown prince Mohammed bin Salman.
I was going to ask you about that. Is it due in large part to the influence of this much younger crown prince who presents himself as a modernizer?
There is no doubt that the crown prince has a lot of influence and has brought a lot of energy to Saudi Arabia. His Vision 2030, which is an economic and social reform plan for Saudi Arabia, has been making waves, allowing women to drive, and particularly actually empowering women is a big part of that. And very importantly, it is the economic argument, the economic imperative that is put forward as being the driver for, if I could use the word driver now, that needs to empower women because of the economic necessities of Saudi Arabia. It's very important to know that many in the religious establishment in Saudi Arabia equate modernization with westernization. And therefore, it's very important for the Saudi authorities to not make that connection and to showcase this as an economic imperative.
And the government's already been accused by some conservative voices of bending the verses of Sharia by lifting this ban on women driving. So could there still be some resistance, do you think, from within the country? Because this hasn't yet been implemented. It's not really a done deal.
For sure, there will be a lot of resistance. Saudi Arabia and Saudi society is by and large conservative, particularly the religious establishment, which again, King Salman and his crown prince have taken on, stripped them of many of their powers, including their powers to arrest Saudi citizens. So I expect that there'd be a resistance, but it's also important here, you pointed out to the Quran and Sharia law, there's historical precedents. The Prophet Muhammad's wife, Aisha, led thousands of men in battle on camel 1,400 years ago. These things can be argued both in historical and religious contexts.
You mentioned the review of guardianship laws. Also, we've seen women allowed to vote and to run for seats on the kingdom's local councils. What do you think might be next in terms of women catching up? And they still have some way to go, obviously, but catching up a little bit with the rights of men in this kingdom.
I think there's no shortage of various domains and aspects of which Saudi women can be empowered. Certainly, Vision 2030 lays out the prospects or a plan to increase women participation in the labor force. I think now they're about 25% of the labor force. There's plans to get that over 30 and 35%. They're breaking ceilings. The Saudi Stock Exchange now is chaired by a woman. But also we have to be mindful that history is littered with royals who have gotten too far ahead of their conservative societies. The Shah of Iran comes to mind, the King of Afghanistan comes to mind. And I think the Saudi leadership is also very cognizant of that and the need to slowly and gradually move people in the right direction.
All right, thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Firas MAKSAD joining us from Washington, D.C.